Hey guys, what's up? I hope that your preparations for the upcoming RBI Grade B exam are going really well. So, welcome to today's lecture for the ESI, that is Economics and Social Issues series for RBI Grade B Phase 2 exam. And today we're going to discuss a very basic topic once again, which is environmental issues. Okay, so this is again a topic which is very crucial in terms of the fact that a lot of questions are recently being asked in the RBI exam which directly pertain to the issues which are related to the environment, right? But the thing is that direct static questions are very few, almost negligible, almost zero. So direct questions you may or may not expect from it. That is why I haven't even discussed any direct question in terms of the previous year's papers with this in the beginning of this video, which I generally do, because there are not much direct questions which can actually be asked from it and haven't actually been asked from it. But it is a very basic topic in the sense that till the time you do not know this topic, you cannot do all the current affairs based things when you are studying for the RBI exam, right? So if you want to do the current affairs well, because a lot of current based questions are asked, so for that you need to know all of these static things, right? So again, as usual, the same drill we're going to follow for this chapter as well, which we do, and that is the try to study this chapter from this video and see this video only once and try to make notes out of it so that next time you can save a lot of time when you are trying to do the same chapter, right? And as soon as you're done with the video, try to go through the PDF notes which we are providing you along with it, because that contains a lot of supplementary material which I am not able to cover in only one presentation, right? So do both of these things together, and once you're done with that, try to avoid going through the video or the PDF again, because you have a lot of area to cover, a lot of ground to cover for the RBI Grade B Phase 2 exam. And if you keep repeatedly watching the same videos or the same PDF, I mean, it will definitely reinforce those concepts in a better sense in your brain. But try to do them in the first go itself in such a way that if you make notes, the next time you just have to go through those notes. Okay, guys. So, on that note, let's begin with the chapter of environmental issues. So, first of all, the contents over here will be that initially we'll talk about the major summits and agreements which are pertain to the environment or the environmental issues. And the first one out of them is the Rio Declaration. Then there is the UNFCC or FCCC, which is the UN framework convention for climate change. That is something that we'll talk about over there as well. And then there's the Montreal Protocol, and then the CBD or the Convention on Biodiversity. Okay, so we'll do all of these, and then after these major summits, we'll talk about the important organizations, and then we'll talk about the Indian Constitution and the environment, and finally we'll move on to the important Indian acts pertaining to the environment. And once we're done with all of these, we'll then do the ISC or the International Solar Alliance, which is a very crucial concept, because uh, the ISA is the first international multilateral organization with its headquarters situated in India. Okay, so that is why it becomes extremely important for the exam. So we're going to do all of these things in this chapter, and I'll try to keep it short and precise, because there's a lot of things that you have to do for the exam, and this chapter itself is not directly important in terms of questions being directly asked in the exam, but yes, indirect questions do come, and of course for current affairs it's very important, so I'll make you study it accordingly. Okay, guys, so let's move ahead then. First of all, the major summits and agreements. So the first major summit is the Rio Declaration. Along with that, the Rio Declaration also came the Agenda 21. Okay, so the Rio Declaration and along with that the Agenda 21 was released. Both of these are very important. Then the UNFCCC is very important, and with in the UNFCCC we'll see all the COPs or the Convention of Parties which take place under UNFCCC, and within those COPs were the Kyoto and the Paris agreements which took place. That is also something that we'll look at. Then we'll see the UNCCD or the Convention on the desertification, I believe. That is something which is not that important. So you can cover that from your notes. But as I mentioned it over here because it is one of the major agreements. And finally, the CBD or the Convention on Biodiversity. This is also important. I'll again cover it in the further slides. Okay, so let's begin with the Rio Declaration first. Rio Declaration is basically something which was signed in the Earth Summit of 1992. Okay, this is also known as the first Earth Summit, and This Earth Summit was basically the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, also known as the UNCED. Okay, so the first UNCED or the first Earth Summit was held in 1992 at Rio de Janeiro, and I hope you remember that Rio de Janeiro is the capital of Brazil, and Brazil is situated in South America. And Brazil is also a part of BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And again, BRICS Bank is also very, very important. So all of these things, I mean, they all make your current affairs, but anything out of these can be asked in the ESI, in the GA section. So you should know all of them. Okay. So Earth Summit, the first Earth Summit was held in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, which is the capital of Brazil. And that was when the Rio Declaration was given towards the end of this summit. Now, what is Rio Declaration? Rio Declaration basically is 27 principles which intended to guide countries towards sustainable development in the future. Okay, these were 27 principles, and these principles were basically the overall direction in which the Rio Declaration wanted to move. And what was the overall thing that it wanted to achieve? It was sustainable development. Okay, so 27 principles for sustainable development. Next, the Rio de Janeiro's Earth Summit also gave us the Agenda 21. What is the Agenda 21? Agenda 21 is basically the targets for sustainable development in the 21st century. Okay, so for 21st century, we came up with the Agenda 21. And the target year for this Agenda 21 is 2030. So the Agenda 21 will actually come to an end with the ending of the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals, which also have the same target year of 2030. Okay, guys. So this is how you link all of your static and current based concepts, like we're doing in this over here with Rio and Brazil and BRICS and everything, and over here with 2030 we also linked SDGs. That is how you should try to study, so that in lesser time you try and cover greater ground. That is how you will be able to leverage your time. Okay, and don't worry if you just keep doing things the way I am telling you right now. If you just keep going through every single word that you do not understand or that you have forgotten. For example, we're talking about SDGs over here, the BRICS bank over here. uh, all of these things, if you keep just doing them as we go, then you will definitely be able to score very well in the exam. Okay, guys. So moving ahead, the Rio Declaration was signed by 175 countries across the globe. And the Rio Declaration also gave us the polluter pays principle. This is a very important principle. It says that if someone has caused pollution, some country or maybe some, let's say, some corporate organization has caused some kind of pollution which is harming the environment, then that polluter has to pay for the damages caused by whatever things or acts that they have done. Okay, so the polluter pays principle was given by the Rio Declaration. All right, then moving ahead, Rio Declaration is not legally binding. All right, it is not legally binding. Not is the key point over here, not legally binding. Then comes the UNFCCC. The UNFCCC stands for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was signed at the Rio Earth Summit. Okay, so at the same summit when the Rio Declaration was given, the UNFCCC was also signed, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And so when was the Rio Earth Summit? It was in 1992, right? And the UNFCCC, which was signed in 92 at Rio, then came into force in 1994, 2 years later. And where did it come into force? At that point, it came into force with its headquarters at Bonn in Germany. All right. So after that, since 94, every year, that is from 95, every year an annual meeting of this UNFCCC is held, and that annual meeting is known as the COP, or Conference of Parties. Okay, conference. I'm sorry. Let me write it in a nicer way. Conference of Parties. All right. So the COP, or the Conference of Parties, is actually nothing but the annual meeting of the UNFCCC framework. All right. So if 95 the first meeting was held, then the second would be held in 96, and the third meeting, or the third COP, was held in 1997, right? So that is the COP that we are concerned about over here. Most every year a meeting gets held, but very few meetings are there where something really important or critical takes shape. And the first one out of them was the COP 3, in which happened in 1997, where the Kyoto Protocol was given. Okay. And what where is Kyoto? First of all, see, all of these protocols, or everything whatever we're talking about, like the Rio Declaration and the Kyoto Protocol, all these begin with the name of a city. Okay. And which city does the name begin with? The city where that meeting had taken place. All right. So Kyoto is a city in Japan. So this Kyoto Protocol was signed in Japan in 1997 during the third COP, or the third Conference of Party of the UNFCCC. And what did this Kyoto Protocol say? It said that we have to limit the global warming within 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. Okay, so before industrialization, our the changes that we were causing to the environment and the global warming was negligible as compared to what we are doing right now. So before the pre-industrial levels, whatever the average annual temperature was across the world, we have to limit global warming within 2 degrees Celsius above that. That is what the Kyoto Protocol said. Okay. Another very important point over here is that this Kyoto Protocol was actually legally binding on all the signatory parties. All right. Then the third one is that there are actually two commitment periods for this Kyoto Protocol. The first one was between 2008 to 12, and then in 2012 another meeting was held where the second commitment period was decided, and that commitment period is between 2013 to 2020. So basically this year 2020 is the last year where the Kyoto Protocol's second commitment period is going to end. All right. Next, moving ahead, the Kyoto Protocol actually has enlisted certain GHGs which we should try to reduce so as to limit global warming. Because if we want to limit global warming, greenhouse gases is the first thing that we need to target, right? So certain greenhouse gases which the Kyoto Protocol talked about was CO2 or carbon dioxide, then CH4 or methane, then N2O or nitrous oxide, then SF6, I guess it is called sulfur hexafluoride or something. Then came PFCs or perfluorocarbons, and then finally HFCs or hydrofluorocarbons. Okay, all of these gases the Kyoto Protocol talked about in terms of trying to reduce them. And finally, the Kyoto Protocol actually gave us the flexible market mechanism and carbon trading. Okay, so what is a flexible market mechanism? It is basically a mechanism in with which we try to control the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases which are being emitted by all kinds of entities which exist in the market. All right. And more specifically, it is basically on a larger level, it is a way in which countries try to limit their greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. And the carbon trading is one of the key things that the Kyoto Protocol gave under the flexible market mechanism. And what is this carbon trading? This basically is an emission trading kind of a thing. So if you guys have studied the PSLCs, or the priority sector lending certificates, then you will very easily understand the carbon trading as well. It is basically nothing but the every country has to limit or reduce its carbon emissions, or let's say any other greenhouse gas emissions, by some fixed amount. And for whatever reductions any country does, that country gets certain carbon credits. Okay, I'm giving this to you in a very crude sense because you do not need to know it for the exam. This won't be asked, but I'm still giving it to you in a very crude sense. Okay, so what they get is carbon credits. Now, if some country does a lot of reductions it will get a lot of credits, right? So, and those credits can even go beyond its actual targets, and another country might actually struggle to meet its targets, right? So once that happens, then the country which has actually done greater reductions can then go out there and sell this country which has reduced more, X country, and this country Y which needs more reductions. This country X can actually sell its credits to the country Y. So the country Y, instead of actually reducing its carbon footprint, can, if it's not being able to do that, it can simply buy those credits from the other country. And that is how, even if one country is not being able to actually achieve it, the world as a whole will ultimately end up reducing the same amount of carbon which we want to. Okay, and that is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is not just one country, the ultimate goal is to save the earth, right? So that is what the flexible marketing mechanism, or the flexible market mechanism with the carbon trading, is trying to achieve. All right, guys. So then moving ahead, non-compliance will lead to the shortfall plus 30% being added to the next year's targets, because it is legally binding. So if someone does not comply to its their if some country does not comply to their annual uh, targets, then whatever the shortfall is, for example, they needed to reduce 100 and they did only 80, then the shortfall is of 20, right? So whatever the shortfall is, that will be increased by 30% as a penalty for not doing so in the same year, and that will then be added. So this into 1.3, or 30% added to it, will then be added to the next year's targets. Alright, guys. And India ratified the Kyoto Protocol in 2017. So that is again a very important thing. When did India ratify the Kyoto Protocol? Very recently, 3 years back in 2017. Okay, guys. So let's move ahead then. Okay. So now comes the COP 21 of the UNFCCC. So after the third COP, or the COP 3, which was held in 1997, after that no other COP is very extremely crucial from the, from the perspective of the exam, in terms of the fact that an old COP can be asked. But Paris Agreement, which was held, which was signed during the COP 21 of 2015, is extremely crucial. Okay, so after the COP 3 comes the COP 21, which was held in 2015. And again, where was this held? It was held in Paris, which is in France, and that is why the agreement is known as the Paris Agreement. So what is the Paris Agreement then? The Paris Agreement basically talks about, once again, limiting the global warming within 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels, similar to the Kyoto Protocol. But it also says, goes one step ahead, and going further, it says that we also need to pursue a target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Okay, so it says that 2 degrees Celsius is the ultimate limit which we will never let breach, but we will try to pursue a target of 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels now. Okay, try to limit global warming within that level. Second thing is that Kyoto was legally binding, but Paris Agreement is not legally binding, and it is only its reporting requirements are mandatory. Okay, so whatever you are doing, whatever you have achieved, that reporting which you have to do, those reporting requirements are mandatory, but the overall targets of the Paris Agreement are not legally binding. Okay, guys. Next thing is the INDCs. Now, COP 21, or the Paris Agreement, is what brought about a very, very crucial concept in terms of this, because this has directly been asked in a number of exams, including your RBI Grade B Phase 2 exam. So, this is extremely important because INDCs is something that all of them consider to be crucial. So, what is INDCs? INDCs basically stand for Intended Nationally Determined Contributions. What does this mean? This actually means that the nation itself intentionally determines what it wants to contribute towards the saving of the environment or reducing the climate change. So it's similar to the fact that when you go into, let's say, go to a party or maybe a reception or somewhere, and over there you're trying to give them a gift, right? So whenever you take a gift, you don't say that because a gift is supposed to be a voluntary thing, it is supposed to be whatever we want to give, so we'll try to save a lot of money in that. You never do that. Why? Because whenever you try to gift someone, you give a gift which would be, fit for your own status, right? So according to your own status, according to what you earn, and according to what you are supposed to contribute when giving a gift, according to that. For example, if a person is earning, let's say, 10 lakh rupees a month, it's, I mean, a person who's doing well, right? Such a person would generally tend to give a good gift, maybe worth 10,000 or 20,000 rupees bare minimum, might even go up to 1 lakh rupees, right? But that person would never give a small gift worth only 100 rupees, right? Because that is not correct as per according to his or her status, right? Similarly, if a person is only earning, let's say, 10,000 rupees, or maybe even less, let's say 5,000 rupees a month. Let's talk about 5,000 rupees, okay? So if a person is earning only 5,000 rupees a month, then you can't expect that person to give you a gift worth 10,000 or even 5,000, right? That person would probably bring a gift worth maybe 500 or even 100 if that person is actually falling short of money, right? So that is exactly what the Paris Agreement talked about, that you should give your own INDCs, or intended nationally determined contributions, in the sense that when you will give too less, you will yourself be morally obligated to do more, because the entire world would be expecting you to do better. And if you are yourself such a country which is very small and can't do much, then no one would actually force you to give a lot of, or do a lot of things to which would actually, hamper your industrial growth at the same time, right? Because industrial nations can actually reduce them, but specifically those countries like India, which are still trying to develop and which haven't even contributed much in historical terms to the industrial, like the industrialized nations have done to the climate change, then that those nations will actually be given some leeway, right? So this is INDCs, is the concept that the Paris Agreement gave. Further, the Paris Agreement was ratified by India in 2016 only. Okay, so because of its voluntary nature and non-legally binding targets, it was ratified by India even before India ratified the Kyoto Protocol. Okay, and USA has actually moved out of the Paris Agreement recently, and after serving its notice period, it will legally move out of the Paris Agreement in November 2020. Okay, guys. Next, we'll see what India's INDCs are. So, India's INDCs, the most important, the first one out of them is to reduce emissions by 33 to 35%, that is at least one third or more of the GDP at 2005 levels by 2030. Okay, so by 2030, by this year, we will reduce one third of our emissions as a percentage or as a ratio of our GDP over 2005 levels. Okay, guys. Next is the use of non fossil fuel sources. We have to use only 40% uh, fossil sources, and uh, 40% non fossil sources and 60% fossil sources for our total energy needs by 2030. Okay, so 40% of our energy overall should come from non fossil sources by 2030. And then the next one is to achieve 175 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2022. This is a very very important thing once again, because this has been asked in a number of exams, in the pre mains, everywhere. It somehow falls, so you should know this one. Okay, 175 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2022. And out of this 175 gigawatts, you should make notes of this, that 100 gigawatts is from solar. Okay, so 100 gigawatts we have a target of achieving from solar. 60 gigawatts is from wind. All right, then 10 gigawatts is from biomass, and what remains now, 160 and 10 is 170 gigawatts. So what remains is only 5 gigawatts, right? Because the total is 175 gigawatts. So the remaining 5 gigawatts is supposed to come from small hydro. Alright guys, so this is the breakup for all of these renewable energy targets for the year 2022. Okay, you should remember them. Then moving ahead, the last target is to create 2.5 to 3 billion tons of additional CO2 or carbon dioxide sink by 2030 once again. So all of these targets are for 2030, except for this, of course. All of others are for 2030. 2.5 to 3 billion tons of additional CO2 sink. Okay, let's move ahead then. Now come the Montreal Protocol and the Kigali Agreement. So the Montreal Protocol was actually signed in 1989. It's very, very old. And the protocol was actually on substances that deplete the ozone layer. So that is the first time when we actually started talking about substances which are depleting our ozone layer. Okay. And this Montreal protocol included the phasing out of CFCs, that is chlorofluorocarbons, HCFCs, CTCs, and halons. Alright, these four gases, you should remember that these four gases are what the Montreal Protocol started the phasing out of. Then the Kigali Agreement of 2016, this is a more recent one. This was actually signed in the meeting of parties, that is the MOP 28. Okay. So, like we talked about the COPs over there, over here we talk about the meeting of parties or the MOPs. So, MOP 28 is when the Kigali Agreement was signed. And this was actually nothing but an amendment to the Montreal Protocol. Okay, amendment to the Montreal Protocol. And it aims, the main aim of this Kigali Agreement is actually to work towards the complete phasing out of HFCs or the hydrofluorocarbons, because these were being used at a much larger scale. And the target over here is to reduce the manufacture and use of HFCs by 80 to 85% by the year 2045. Okay, and if we actually achieve this target, then it will arrest the global average temperature rise by 0.5 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Okay, so imagine we're talking about trying to keep the global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, and then trying to pursue 1.5 degrees Celsius. Imagine 0.5 degrees Celsius by the year 2020 2100 is what we can do by only reducing one single gas. That is how important it has become. That is why this Kigali Agreement was totally it was revolving around only HFCs. Okay, that is how important they are. Alright guys, so let's move ahead then. CBD. Now the CBD stands for the Convention on Biological Diversity, and it came into effect in 1993. Okay, it is binding for all signatories to take appropriate measures for conservations of biodiversity and sustainable utilization of its benefits. So number one, conservation, and number two, sustainable utilization is what it talks about for the biological diversity. Alright guys, the CBD has three main goals. The first is conservation, the second is sustainable use, and the third is fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from genetic resources. Okay, conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of its components, that is biological diversity's components, and fair and equitable use, sharing of the benefits arising from genetic resources. Okay, next come the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety, which was signed in 2002, and then the Nagoya Protocol of 2010. Okay, these are very important, and both of them fall under the CBD or the Convention on Biodiversity. So the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety is actually something that talks about protecting the living modified organisms, or the LMOs as we talk about, and these LMOs are actually nothing but the result of modern technology. Okay, so the word living modified organisms is self-explanatory, I believe, and Cartagena Protocol is trying to protect these LMOs. Then the Nagoya Protocol of 2010 is actually a protocol which talks about access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their utilization. Okay, so this point number 3, let me change the pen. this point number 3, which is the third main goal of CBD, is actually what the Nagoya Protocol directly talks about. Alright, guys. So let's move ahead then. Important organizations now. Now there are a few important international organizations which work directly for the welfare or the protection of the environment, and I'll give you a rough idea about each one of them, just enough to make you acquainted with them, in terms of the fact that if any one of them is asked on a very basic level in the exam, you should know it. And if you read any report or any kind of index or something that is launched by them, you always know that which organization has done that. And if they're talking about, let's say, IPCC or WWF, then you should at least know that what does it actually stand for and what are we actually trying to talk about over here. Okay, so first of all, the first organization over here is the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay, so this IPCC is actually uh, an organization which was formed by two organizations. The first is the UNEP, or the United Nations Environment Program, and the second is the WMD, or the WMO, or the World Meteorological Organization. World Meteorological Organization. Okay, UNEP and WMO came together to form this IPCC, and along with this, the main the main goal of IPCC, what is it? The main goal is to produce scientific information on climate change, or CC as we call it. Okay, because it is IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So what it does is it produces scientific information on CC, or climate change. Okay, guys. The next organization over here, the second one, is WWF, or the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Okay, so what does this Worldwide Fund for Nature do? This WWF actually works for stopping the degradation of the natural environment. Okay, natural environment, and builds a better future for humans as well as the nature, so that they can live in harmony. Okay, so it is first of all, the first thing that I told you was that it works to stop the natural environment's degradation. Okay, degradation, let's put the word degradation as well over here. Stop degradation of, I'm sorry, I won't be able to write everything over here because I'm in a dearth of space. I'm falling short of space over here. So just keep writing whatever I tell you. It works to stop the degradation of natural environment and build a better future. Okay, build a better future. And a better future for whom? For humans plus nature. Okay, guys. So that is the basic thing about WWF. The third organization that we're talking about over here is CITES, that is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. Okay, and CITES is something that was formed by the UNEP, once again, or the United Nations Environment Program. And what does it do? It actually authorizes the the international trade in endangered species of wild plants and animals, that is the flora and fauna. It authorizes through licensing. Okay, so it gives licenses and authorizes certain specific in certain specific cases the international trade in endangered species of wild flora and fauna, which in general are prohibited to be traded, prohibited in terms of trade. Okay, so that is what CITES does. And then number 4 over here is the traffic stands for the Wildlife Trade Monitoring Network. Okay, the Wildlife Trade Monitoring Network. And traffic was formed by WWF that is the Worldwide Fund for Nature, which we talked about above, plus IUCN, okay, plus CITES. CITES again we talked about above. So WWF plus IUCN plus CITES, these three organizations came together to form the traffic. And for traffic, the headquarters of traffic are in Cambridge, which is in the, I hope you know where Cambridge is. It's in the United Kingdom. Okay, because you must remember the famous Cambridge University and the Cambridge publishers. All of them, they are from the Britain, the Great Britain or the United Kingdom. Okay, so these are the very basic organizations which you should all know. And if you guys do not know about IUCN, again, I can't tell you everything over here right now, but IUCN is a very basic thing. I hope that most of you do know about it. But if you do not, please Google it. It's a very small thing. You should know. Okay. So let's try and move ahead now. Let's try to finish this chapter as soon as possible, because I don't want you guys to waste a lot of time over here. So the next thing is Indian Constitution and the environment. Now, the Indian Constitution talks about the environment at two specific instances. The first is in the DPSPs, the Article 48A. The 48 Article 48A is actually an article which states that the state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forests and wildlife of the country. Okay, so the state, that is the government of the government of the nation overall, shall endeavor to, or India overall shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and safeguard the forests and wildlife of the country. Okay, so this is the directive principle of state policy, which overall gives the state a direction as to how it should make its policies. All right, and the second instance is the fundamental duties, which are actually the duties which citizens should ideally follow. These fundamental duties, the Article 58A clause G, okay, the article, sorry, 51A, the Article 51A clause G says that it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, and to have a compassion for all living creatures in general. Okay, this is what the fundamental duties Article 51A clause G says. Okay, so these are the two instances where the constitution directly talks about the environment, which definitely shows us that yes, the constitution makers were somehow trying to uh, reinforce this fact that the environment is a very crucial aspect uh, of the earth in general and for our country as well in particular. And we do have a willingness, and we also have the capability. So capability and willingness is there. That is why we are putting it in the constitution that we will strive to protect the environment, forest, wildlife, lakes, rivers, and the living creatures in general. Okay, guys, so let's move ahead then. The important acts. So the important Indian acts which try to conserve or protect the environment, they are, the first one is the Water Act, the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974. Okay, so the Water Act of 1974 along with the Water Cess Act of 1977. All right, this act gave the regulatory authority and funds to the CPCB, that is the Central Pollution Control Board, and the SPCBs, or the State Pollution Control Boards. They were given the regulatory authority and the funds for the prevention of pollution and the protection of the water in general. Okay, the second act that we talk about is the Air Act of 1981, that is the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981. And along with that, there is the 1987 amendment to it. Okay, and both of these acts, basically the act and the amendment to it, they actually expanded the authorities of the CPCB and SPCBs. Okay, so they actually expanded the authorities of the Central Pollution Control Board and the State Pollution Control Boards. And uh, the 1987 amendment had actually added noise pollution to this air air prevention and control of pollution act. Okay, so noise pollution was also then considered as a form of air pollution with this amendment. All right, guys. Then the third act that we talk about is the Environment Protection Act, or the EPA as we call it in common terminologies, the Environment Protection Act of 1986, the EPA 1986. Now, this EPA was actually legislated in 1986, that is just after the Bhopal gas tragedy. Okay, so this was the EPA was passed after the Bhopal gas tragedy. I mean, okay, you can write that, guys, right? Bhopal gas tragedy, and uh, it was actually passed to implement the UN Convention on the UN's Convention on Human Environment. Okay, the UN Convention on Human Environment. And in general, also, what why EPA is important is because EPA is actually an umbrella act. All right, guys, it is an umbrella act under which most things which we are trying to do for the protection and protection of the environment and the prevention of pollution, most of them we actually put it under this EPA. So EPA is actually a very very vast umbrella act. All right. And then the last one that we talk about is the fourth one, NGT. NGT is actually the National Green Tribunal Act. Okay, National Green Tribunal Act. And this National Green Tribunal Act was actually passed to expeditiously dispose of the cases which were pertaining to the environment. Okay, because we know that the judiciary in general for the country is so overburdened with all kinds of cases that it is not able to pass legislations timely, right? I mean, on time, they it's very next to impossible to pass all of those legislations. It generally takes, I mean, 8 to 10 years is the very bare minimum which it takes. And even if 10 years pass for situations where the environment is being harmed in certain scenarios, in that case, within 10 years, like, so much harm can be caused to the environment that it would be irreparable no matter how much money the polluter has to pay, right? So the National Green Tribunal was then actually, this act was passed in 2010 to form the National Green Tribunal, because some things can not wait, because especially the environment, it cannot wait. I mean, if some polluter is uh, trying to harm the environment somehow, we need to stop that polluter as soon as possible. Okay, so for that, the National Green Tribunal Act was passed. And then under this National Green Tribunal Act, this NGT is actually consists of 10 experts plus 10 judicial members. Okay, so that is what this NGT consists of. And apart from that, it has to dispose of all the cases related to environment within 6 months. Okay, 6 months. So that is all about the NGT, and I believe uh, we're almost done with this chapter. Now all that is left is the ISA, or the International Solar Alliance. So what is the ISA? ISA is something that was launched by the PM Narendra Modi and with the President of France on the 30th of November 2015. So it's a relatively newer organization, launched only 5 years back in 2015, and it was launched at the UNCCC conference at Paris, right? And remember what happened in this UNCCC Paris conference in 2015. The Paris Agreement was also signed over here. So, along with the signatory of the Paris Agreement, the ISA, or the International Solar Alliance, was also launched. And who were primarily responsible for the launch of the ISA? It was India and France. So what is ISA basically? ISA is an alliance of the sunshine countries. What do you mean by sunshine countries? Sunshine countries are basically those countries which receive sunshine for more than 300 days in a year. Okay, receiving sunshine for more than 300 days in a year. And these countries actually lie between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. All right, so these are tropical countries. So tropical countries with more than 300 days of annual sunshine are known as the sunshine countries. That is again a crucial concept which can be asked in your exam. And these sunshine countries are actually a part of the alliance of ISA. Okay, and the ISA plans to increase the global share of solar energy to 1000 gigawatts by the year 2030. All right, that's its main aim for now. Now, the important part over here is that the headquarter of ISA is in Gurugram, India, at the National Institute of Solar Energy, or the NICE as we call it. This is the first multilateral organization to have its headquarters in India. And where is the headquarters located? It is in the city of Gurugram, that is in Haryana. Okay. So, next one, the last point over here is that India's aim is to reach 100 gigawatts of solar power capacity by the year 2022, right? So India has an aim of overall 175 gigawatts of renewable capacity by 2024, and out of which 100 gigawatts is supposed to be from solar energy itself. Okay guys, so that is all for the chapter of environmental issues in general. And this, I hope that you've understood everything that we talked about over here. And if you guys have any other issues or queries, then please put them down in the discussion section below, and we will try to answer all of them as soon as possible. Alright guys, and if you guys have any other queries which are not pertaining to this chapter about something else and they are not being answered over here in the discussion section below, then you can write to us for those queries at our email id, which is hi@litmode.in. Okay, hi@litmode.in. You can write to us over there. But for preferably for our queries in, I mean, especially those ones which are pertaining to this chapter, please put them down in the discussion section below, because that is the first thing that we look at when we're trying to answer queries. That is the fastest way. And secondly, it is also fastest because you write it down with the exact chapter, and the exact faculty concerned is directly communicated to. Okay guys, so thank you so much for watching this chapter. If you are done with it, and if you've made notes, and if you've understood everything, then please go through the PDF notes which we've provided you as soon as possible, so that before forgetting it, you can actually reinforce those concepts in a proper manner. Alright guys, so thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you like it, and I'll meet you guys now in the next video or the next chapter for the ESI series. Okay, thank you so much guys. Goodbye, take care, and please study hard, study well, and leverage your time, because you have to crack the exam in this attempt itself. Okay guys, so goodbye, take care.